Alright, so let's have a look at the last section. And today we're going to be going through the most advanced parts of back EMF. So we're going to be looking at advanced back EMF. So if you're not comfortable with EMF, I would highly recommend checking out some of the previous videos. This video is going to be really pushing you to that next level in terms of understanding back EMF. So the question that I want to start off with is, let's assume that your motor exists in a perfect world. There is no air resistance, there is no any kind of energy loss. Is it possible for my motor to therefore run without any electricity, without any current passing through it? So can my motor rotate without any current passing through it if there, this is a world without any losses? Have a guess. So the answer, surprisingly, is yes. You can have a motor run. It can be rotating without any electricity, without any current passing through it. And that is probably very surprising. But we're going to go through that in a lot more depth later on. And it can actually be attached to, like, say, a brick, and it can be rotating the brick, but it won't be able to do useful work. And we'll explain why in a sec. But before we do, I want you to go through, let's do another particular question. Let's say that I want you to graph what is the back EMF, what is the magnitude of the back EMF versus time. So I want you to graph how does the back EMF change over time. What does it look like? Have a go at this yourself. Well, it's going to look a bit like this. It's going to look a bit like this. It's got this kind of logarithmic shape, right? And it approaches this. Can you guess what this is? It's V supply. So our lesson today is going to be primarily focused on explaining why does it look like this. So we'll be explaining two important things. One, why does it approach V supply? Two, why does it have this particular shape? So let's get started. So why approach V supply? So this one's not so hard to explain. We can see that as you rotate faster, the change in flux over time, right? Our delta T as we rotate faster and faster actually decreases, which makes this whole fraction increase, right? If you decrease the denominator, it gets bigger, which means that our EMF, it will increase, right? If we decrease the denominator, we increase our overall fraction, so we're increasing what our EMF is. And so because we're going to be increasing our back EMF, therefore we approach V supply. Therefore, it trends upwards to V supply. Okay, so that's the first part. The second question that we're going to answer is, what about the shape? So explaining the shape. So let's try and explain the shape to ourselves. Why does it kind of have this curve where initially you can see that it's rising very rapidly, and then then it rises slowly? So why is that? Well, to really understand this, we need to go back to some of the basics. So we want to think about how V net is equal to V supply minus back EMF. So this means that as we increase our back EMF, right, and V supply stays constant, we're going to be decreasing our V net. You might say, so what, right? Well, if we decrease our V net, right, so V net Well, we know that V net is equal to IR, right? V is equal to IR, Ohm's law. So we're going to be decreasing our V net, we'll be decreasing our current. And if we decrease our current, we know that F is equal to BIL. If we decrease our current, we'll be decreasing the net amount of force. We're decreasing the net amount of force on our armature. And of course, F is equal to ma, right? So if we decrease our net force, we'll be decreasing the acceleration that will be occurring here. Now, technically, if you're a bit more advanced, you might know that technically this must be like torque and angular acceleration, but it's really the same thing. We can think about basically, the more force we have here, the more accelerating the more acceleration our coil experiences, it will rotate faster. Give me a second. I think the garbage truck is here. So if we use this knowledge, okay, let's try and understand why this creates the shape. So we can think about a constant velocity of rotation gives us a constant change in flux over time, which gives us a constant back EMF. Okay, and just for the sake of completeness, this gives us a constant V net, of course, by the subtraction thing. Now, if we were to instead take this a bit further, that's if we want a constant back EMF, right? But we don't want a constant back EMF. We know that EMF is increasing. We want an increasing back EMF. So we have an increasing velocity of rotation, which is just acceleration, right? Then we're going to have a increasing change in flux over time, which leads to an increasing back EMF, right? Which leads to an increase. Sorry. so that's an increasing back EMF. But the more concerning thing is that leads to a decreasing V net, right? If you think about, if I have an increasing back EMF, I have a decreasing V net. Okay. So that's a problem. And you know why it's a problem? Because if I have a decreasing V net, let's see what that creates. Let's kind of follow it through. I have a decreasing V net, that leads to a decreasing current as before, which leads to a decreasing force, which leads to a decreasing acceleration. But we can see here that it is acceleration in the first place that is going to be able to increase our back EMF. So you see that by virtue of increasing our back EMF, it's going to decrease our V net and all that other garbage. But basically, this decreasing V net is now going to decrease. It's going to decrease our acceleration. So then we have less. Our velocity increases slower. Our change in flux over change in time increases slower, and our back EMF increases more slowly. As a concrete example, let's say that before our acceleration was, let's say, 1 meter per second squared. That creates some increase. That creates an increasing change in flux over time, increases our back EMF. But because we've increased our back EMF, we're also going to be decreasing our V net, and by the effect seen here, if we do all this stuff, we're going to be decreasing the acceleration. So now our acceleration is only maybe 0.1 meter per second squared. Again, we go through. Our velocity is increasing more slowly. Our change in flux over time is increasing more slowly. Our back EMF is increasing more slowly. So that means that we will. Our back EMF is increasing more slowly. And again, because our back EMF is still increasing a little bit, it'll still decrease our V net. And because of the above thing over here, decreased V net, decreased current, decreased force, decreased acceleration. So we decrease acceleration again. And you can see that this is just a, it just keeps getting, the acceleration keeps getting lower and lower and lower. And that explains why we have this kind of curve here. So this keeps getting more and more flat, because our acceleration keeps on decreasing. Now, the last part that I wanted to go through today was, back to that kind of rotation thing. So you can see that after an infinite amount of time, it reaches V supply. Now let's have a think about this, right? If V net is equal to V supply minus EMF back, if your back EMF reaches V supply, what does that mean? Now it's equals 0, right? So the net voltage is 0. What does that mean? Well, let's have a look. Let's have a bit of a sticky peek into this one. That means that after an infinite amount of time, my motor, in an ideal world, no resistance, it will be rotating. It'll be rotating, spinning around, and it will have no current inside. So the current inside, there will be 0 current inside. Why is that? Well, let's have a think about it. So we can say that, the back EMF, so basically, the back EMF has finally, become equal to the V supply. But then you might say, how can it actually rotate then? Well, don't forget, it has inertia, right? So this coil is often quite heavy. Because it has mass, it's going to have, inertia, it has velocity, it can keep rotating. So because of its inertia, it keeps rotating. And so it doesn't need any current to actually keep rotating. And this is also true if it has a big brick inside, right? If it has a big brick attached to it, it can still rotate. It'll just take longer to reach this state. But this brick also has inertia. It can also rotate like this big coil can. But it comes back to what I was saying. It can't actually do any useful work, because as soon as you want to, say, make it lift something up, then you actually need to have you need to actually put energy in, right? Because if you want to lift a big concrete block up, then you need to actually put energy in for this to happen. So you can't simply rely on the velocity, on the rotational velocity there. And one final thing for today is I want you to also graph. I want you to graph, once again, back EMF over time. But this time in the real world, where there is energy loss. Have a go at this one. So your graph should look a bit like this. Same shape, but now in this case, here's our V supply. See this difference here? You're like, what the hell is that? Well, we know that V net is the V supply minus back EMF. So we can see that. so if we do this visually, this dashed line is our V supply. This red line is our back EMF. It's going to equal to some number. Maybe let's say 3 volts, right? So it seems even after an infinite amount of time, we still need to have some net voltage there, some 3 volts there. Why? Well, remember, this is the real world. There's going to be energy losses to things like friction with like air resistance, friction with the bearings, right? Because obviously a motor has to rotate, so there's going to be a bearing. There's some friction there. You might have resistance of the wires. All of these things are going to create losses. So we know the formula P is equal to V squared over R. So we need some voltage, right? We need some voltage to give a little bit of power in, right? So this is power in, and so power in replaces power loss via things like, you know, heat, air resistance, all the things that we mentioned before. But yeah, I think that's about all the time we have for today. Back EMF doesn't have to be a confusing topic. Hopefully that made it a bit more approachable and simple. This is definitely more of the advanced one. It's not something that you'd have to be able to understand for HSC, but sure it's interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.